RIP to the Drake stands. Can only imagine what that feels like. Lawbrey Graham, Drizzy Fake, the snitch god, dropped some toilet water last night.
I can't make it. That was ass.
Everybody laughed when Drake dropped Iceman, but nobody expected what happened next. Because the second the album hit streaming platforms, the entire rap industry started turning on Drake publicly. Rappers were clowning him. Streamers were calling the album mid. Critics said he sounded washed. Even some of Drake's own fans looked confused listening to those 40-plus tracks at 3 in the morning trying to figure out what this man was even doing. But then things got ugly. Because instead of staying quiet, Drake started responding. And the response is, yeah, they got the internet shook. We're talking direct shots at Rick Ross, subliminals toward LeBron James, smoke for DJ Khaled, disrespect aimed at A$AP Rocky, and even weird tension with J. Cole still hanging in the air after the Kendrick war. And according to fans online, Drake sounds angry. Not regular rap beef angry either. Like genuinely betrayed. Because to Drake, this album wasn't just music. This sounded like revenge. Revenge on everybody who switched sides during the Kendrick Lamar beef. Revenge on people who stayed silent. Revenge on friends who didn't defend him. And now fans are saying Iceman feels less like an album and more like a hit list with beats behind it. But here's where the story gets insane. The people clowning Drake weren't random Twitter trolls. These were major names. Kai Cenat reacted live looking uncomfortable. Commentators started saying Drake sounded stuck in 2024 mentally. Even hip-hop pages that normally defend him started questioning whether he's finally losing the culture for real this time. Then came the craziest part of all. Instead of crashing out publicly, Drake responded in the coldest way possible. No emotional live stream. No screaming on Instagram Live. Number 20-minute rant. Just one quiet post that had the entire internet debating instantly. And somehow, that one post made fans even more divided. Because now people are asking a dangerous question. What if Drake actually planned this entire reaction? What if the bloated track list, the non-stop disses, the chaos, the confusion, all of it was intentional? Some fans think Drake is spiraling after losing the Kendrick battle. Others think he's setting the industry up again the same way he did during the Take Care era when critics hated him at first before the album became legendary. But either way, the reactions became brutal fast. People started calling Iceman Drake's fall-off album. Others said it's secretly one of his best rap performances in years. Meanwhile, streamers, rappers, critics, and even former allies started picking sides publicly in real time. And honestly, this whole situation no longer feels like normal album criticism anymore. It feels like the entire rap world is testing whether Drake still has the power to survive another industry-wide pylon after Kendrick already damaged his image once before. Because if this album fails, people think it could permanently change Drake's position in hip-hop forever. But if it succeeds, then everybody clowning him right now might end up looking very stupid a year from now. And trust me, once you hear which rappers Drake dissed, who fired back immediately, and the one response that made the internet completely lose its mind, this story gets way crazier than people realize. The craziest thing about Drake dropping Iceman wasn't even the music at first. It was the atmosphere around the release. Because before people even pressed play, the internet already felt ready to destroy him. That's how bad things had gotten after the Kendrick Lamar battle. For the first time in Drake's entire career, people weren't waiting excitedly for an album. They were waiting to judge him. And Drake knew it. That's why the rollout felt so strange, dramatic, and almost paranoid from the beginning. Instead of doing normal interviews or promo, Drake started building this weird, mysterious Iceman aesthetic online. Dark visuals, cold themes, cryptic captions, Pinocchio imagery everywhere. Fans kept trying to decode it. Was Drake calling Kendrick a liar? Was he exposing the industry? Or was the Pinocchio thing secretly about himself after all the accusations during the beef? Nobody really knew. But one thing became obvious fast. Drake wasn't moving like someone trying to make a fun album anymore. He was moving like somebody trying to prove a point. And honestly, that energy made the entire rollout feel tense before the music even arrived. Then came the live streams. And this is where fans really started getting nervous. Drake's Iceman episodes were supposed to feel legendary, like some huge cultural moment before the album dropped. People expected bombshells, industry-shaking disses, maybe even direct responses to Kendrick. Instead, a lot of people felt confused. Fans sat through long stretches of repetitive music loops and cryptic visuals, trying to figure out whether Red Button moment was supposed to happen. Reaction channels started getting frustrated live on stream. Even hardcore Drake supporters were sitting there like, "Bro, what exactly are we waiting for?" That's when the joke started. People began clowning the rollout before the album even released. And once social media starts laughing before your project drops, that's dangerous. Because perception online spreads fast. Suddenly timelines were filled with posts saying Drake looked desperate. Others claimed he was trying too hard to seem mysterious after losing control of the narrative during the Kendrick War. Then the craziest part happened. Some fans started saying Drake looked emotionally stuck in 2024. That hit hard, because one of the biggest criticisms after the Kendrick battle was that Drake couldn't let it go mentally. And now people were wondering if Iceman was about music or revenge. Then May 15th finally arrived, and Drake did something nobody expected. Not one album, not two, 3 separate projects. Iceman, Habibi, Maid of Honor, over 40 tracks total, more than 2.5 hours of music. The internet lost its mind instantly. Some fans were excited, others looked exhausted before even listening, because people immediately started asking the same question. Why is Drake dropping this much music right now? And honestly, it felt intentional. Like Drake wanted to flood the conversation completely. No matter what anybody said, the entire rap world now had to talk about him. And they did. Immediately. But not always positively. The reaction started becoming brutal within hours. Some listeners claimed the project sounded bloated. Others said Drake was dissing too many people at once. Critics accused him of sounding bitter and obsessed with betrayal. But then another side of the internet started saying something very different. They claimed Drake was rapping harder than he had in years. That's what made the conversation so chaotic. Nobody could agree on what Iceman actually was. Was it a comeback, a meltdown, a revenge album, a masterpiece, or the beginning of Drake's decline? The confusion made the album even bigger online. Because controversy creates streams. And Drake understands internet psychology better than almost any rapper alive. That's why the diss list shocked everybody so badly. Because Drake wasn't throwing random sneak disses anymore. He was naming people emotionally. Rick Ross caught smoke. DJ Khaled caught smoke. A$AP Rocky caught smoke. LeBron James caught smoke. J. Cole caught emotional bars. Even people who stayed silent during the Kendrick situation somehow became targets. That's why fans started saying the album sounded personal in a different way. Not competitive, not playful, personal. Like Drake had been quietly keeping score for 2 years. And now he finally decided to unload everything at once. That energy made people uncomfortable. Because throughout his career, Drake usually balanced emotional music with confidence and humor. But Iceman felt colder, more bitter, more isolated, almost like Drake against the entire industry. And the internet noticed immediately. That's why reactions from streamers became so important. Because streamers now influence public opinion almost as much as critics do. When Kai Cenat reacted awkwardly to some of the songs, clips spread everywhere instantly. People started saying even Kai looked like he didn't know how to defend the project honestly. And once audiences sense hesitation from major creators, the online narrative snowballs fast. Now suddenly everybody online was debating the same thing. Is Drake still dominating hip-hop? Or are we watching the beginning of the first real collapse of his career? Because according to fans, critics, and even some rappers reacting online, Iceman didn't sound like an artist peacefully making music anymore. It sounded like somebody fighting for control of their legacy in real time. Once the first full night of reactions to Drake's Iceman hit the internet, the entire conversation started turning even uglier. Because now it wasn't just fans debating the music anymore. Now other rappers, streamers, commentators, and hip-hop personalities were openly choosing sides in public. And Drake seemed to be watching all of it. That's what made the atmosphere around this album feel different from a normal release. Usually when Drake drops, Even people who hate him still expect hits. This time, people were waiting to see if he would survive the backlash at all. That's a completely different level of pressure. And honestly, some of the reactions look like they genuinely got under Drake's skin. Especially the criticism accusing him of sounding stuck. Because one thing became obvious after multiple listens to Iceman. Drake was still thinking about the Kendrick Lamar war constantly. The album felt haunted by it. Even when Kendrick's name wasn't directly mentioned, the energy of the beef was everywhere. The betrayal themes, the paranoia, the obsession with loyalty, the constant references to people switching sides. Fans immediately picked up on it. And that's why people online started saying Iceman sounded less like a fresh chapter and more like Drake trying to rewrite the ending of 2024 emotionally. That criticism spread fast, especially after listeners realized how many people Drake targeted throughout the project. Because this wasn't one focused beef. This felt like Drake versus everybody. And the names shocked people. Rick Ross got dissed after publicly trying to cool tensions down beforehand. DJ Khaled caught bars simply for staying quiet during the Kendrick situation. LeBron James got emotional shots over appearing at Kendrick's pop-out concert. A$AP Rocky became one of Drake's biggest targets because of Rihanna history and industry tension. And then there was J. Cole. That situation hit fans differently. Because unlike the others, Drake didn't sound purely angry toward Cole. He sounded hurt. That's why people kept replaying those bars over and over. Drake basically suggested he could never fully forgive Cole for apologizing during the Kendrick battle, especially because they allegedly stopped communicating afterward. And fans immediately realized something. Drake wasn't just dissing enemies on Iceman. He was exposing disappointment. That emotional tone made the album feel heavier than normal rap beef music. Because behind the bars, people could hear resentment building. And once fans sensed real emotion behind the disses, the internet conversation exploded again. Some people defended Drake completely. They argued he had every right to feel betrayed after so many celebrities publicly aligned themselves with Kendrick during the biggest rap battle in years. Others thought Drake looked bitter and unable to move forward. That split created chaos online. Because depending on who you asked, Iceman was either a cold revenge masterpiece or a public emotional spiral. Meanwhile, streamers kept making things worse for Drake accidentally. Every reaction clip went viral instantly. If someone laughed awkwardly during a song, it spread everywhere. If someone looked confused during a diss, Twitter reposted it instantly. And when Kai Cenat gave certain reactions that seemed uncomfortable, fans started debating whether even major Drake supporters were struggling to defend the project honestly. That conversation became dangerous. Because public opinion online now moves through reaction clips faster than through the music itself. People weren't even listening to the album personally anymore. They were watching other people react to it. That changes everything psychologically, especially in modern hip-hop culture. Now suddenly the internet wasn't discussing songs only. It was discussing whether Drake still had cultural dominance at all. That's a massive difference. And critics piled onto that narrative fast. Some reviews called the triple album bloated and repetitive. Others claimed Drake sounded creatively exhausted. A few writers even suggested he was trying to overwhelm listeners with quantity because he no longer trusted his ability to control the culture through quality alone. That criticism hit hard online, because for years, Drake's biggest strength was feeling untouchable culturally. Now people were openly questioning whether the aura was finally cracking. But then something unexpected happened. Some listeners started flipping their opinions after repeated listens. A few songs began gaining momentum online. People started quoting bars, posting edits, breaking down lyrics, debating double meanings. Suddenly, the conversation became complicated again. Because even people criticizing the album admitted Drake was rapping hard on certain tracks. That confused the narrative. If the album was truly terrible, why were so many people still talking about specific bars nonstop? That's when fans started comparing the situation to Take Care. Back in 2011, that album also received criticism initially before becoming one of Drake's most respected projects ever. Drake himself clearly noticed those comparisons too, because instead of crashing out emotionally online, he responded in a very calculated way. No live stream rant, No angry tweets. No defensive interviews. Just one quiet Instagram story showing old hate comments from the Take Care era. And that move changed the conversation immediately. Because now Drake wasn't arguing with critics directly. He was implying history would prove them wrong again. That response split the internet instantly. Some fans called it genius. Others called it delusional coping. But regardless of opinion, one thing became obvious. Drake was playing a psychological game now. He wasn't trying to win everybody over immediately. He was trying to plant doubt in the criticism itself. And according to reactions online, that strategy may have worked better than people expected. Because once fans started comparing Iceman to other Drake albums that were hated initially before aging well, the entire internet conversation became even more chaotic than before. Once Drake posted those old Take Care hate comments on his Instagram story, the internet completely lost its mind again. Because suddenly the conversation wasn't just about whether Iceman was good or bad anymore. Now people were arguing about something even bigger. Was Drake secretly winning the narrative again? That's what made the situation so dangerous. Because Drake has survived backlash before. A lot of backlash. People forget how many times the internet claimed Drake was finished only for him to come back stronger months later. That history matters psychologically. And Drake knows it. That's why the Instagram story hit so hard. He didn't type paragraphs. He didn't defend himself emotionally. He didn't even explain the post. He simply showed the world that people once trashed Take Care too. And instantly, fans started second-guessing themselves. Because whether people admit it or not, nobody wants to end up on the wrong side of history. That fear changed the entire tone online. Suddenly, some listeners started going back to the album, replaying songs, catching bars they missed, breaking down lyrics more carefully. And honestly, a few tracks started hitting harder on second listen. That's when the internet got even more divided. One side still believed Iceman was bloated, bitter, and emotionally stuck in the Kendrick era. But another side started saying Drake was actually rapping at an elite level again, especially on the more aggressive tracks. People began posting bar breakdowns everywhere. The Muggsy Bogues line became a huge topic online. The Dr. Dre wordplay had reaction channels rewinding constantly. The LeBron bars felt personal enough to spark sports debates too. And once fans start dissecting lyrics obsessively, an album gains momentum whether critics like it or not. That's the genius and danger of Drake releases. Even when people hate them, they keep talking about them. Meanwhile, the rappers Drake targeted were reacting in completely different ways. Rick Ross basically crashed out online. And honestly, fans were shocked by how emotional Ross looked afterward. Because before Iceman dropped, Ross had been acting peaceful publicly. He was doing interviews saying Drake should win, saying the culture needed healing, trying to sound mature. But the second Drake dissed him, everything changed. Ross instantly went back into troll mode, posting jokes, reading hate comments dramatically, mocking Drake online, calling the album trash. And fans noticed how quickly the energy flipped. That's why social media started clowning Ross too. People said he looked hurt because he expected a Drake feature and didn't get one. Others believed Ross genuinely felt betrayed after trying to cool tensions down publicly beforehand. Either way, the internet ate the drama up instantly. Then came DJ Khaled. That situation felt even weirder. Because Khaled's crime, according to Drake, was basically silence. Drake seemed genuinely angry that Khaled stayed neutral during the Kendrick battle instead of defending him publicly. That's why the diss hit differently. It wasn't about competition. It was about loyalty again. That theme kept repeating across Iceman constantly. Loyalty, betrayal, silence, switching sides. Fans started realizing Drake might actually care more about perceived disloyalty than the beef itself. That's why the album sounded so emotional underneath all the aggression. And then there was A$AP Rocky. That situation got dark. Because fans immediately connected the Rocky disses to Rihanna history again. And once Rihanna's name enters anything Drake-related online, the internet goes insane automatically. People started debating whether Drake still secretly cares about Rihanna years later. Others claimed the Rocky bars crossed the line completely, especially because Drake sounded genuinely disrespectful on certain tracks. That made listeners uncomfortable, not because rap beef is new, but because Iceman often felt emotionally real in a way most diss-heavy albums don't. That's why reactions became so chaotic. People couldn't decide whether Drake sounded powerful or wounded. And honestly, he sounded like both. Meanwhile, J. Cole staying silent made the situation even stranger. Because unlike Ross or Khaled, Cole refused to escalate publicly. No diss tracks, no interviews, no online trolling, nothing. And fans respected that heavily. Some people even argued Cole looked smarter by refusing to get pulled back into another emotionally exhausting rap war. But Drake's bars toward Cole still hit hard online because people could hear disappointment behind them. That's what made the album feel heavier emotionally than fans expected. This wasn't just Drake flexing. It felt like Drake processing betrayal publicly through music. And the internet became obsessed with that angle. Now another theory started spreading online too. What if the triple album drop wasn't only artistic? What if it was business? Fans began speculating Drake might be trying to fulfill obligations with Universal Music Group because of the ongoing tension surrounding the Kendrick situation and industry politics. That theory exploded online fast, because suddenly the massive track count made more sense strategically. Flood streaming platforms, dominate headlines, complete obligations, control the conversation. If true, it would completely change how people view the rollout. And honestly, that possibility made Iceman feel even more intense. Because now fans weren't just analyzing an album anymore. They were analyzing Drake's entire career position in real time. Was he evolving, escaping, spiraling, or preparing for war against the industry itself? That's why the reactions kept getting bigger every hour. Because Iceman no longer felt like a simple music release. It felt like a public psychological battle between Drake, the rap industry, critics, streamers, former allies, and millions of fans all trying to decide the same terrifying question. Is Drake still untouchable, or are we finally watching the beginning of the end? By the time Part 4 begins, the entire internet feels split straight down the middle over Drake and Iceman. And honestly, the craziest part is that the music almost stopped being the main story completely. Now the real story was the reaction. Because every single person in hip-hop culture seemed to have an opinion suddenly. Streamers, rappers, podcasters, reaction channels, critics, even athletes and celebrities were subtly choosing sides online. That's how massive the conversation became. And the more divided people got, the more the album kept dominating attention everywhere. Which honestly might have been Drake's plan the entire time. Because whether people loved Iceman or hated it, they could not stop talking about it. That's power. And Drake understands that better than almost anybody in the industry. Meanwhile, the reactions from streamers became another huge part of the story. Because streamers now influence music culture almost as much as radio stations used to. A viral reaction clip can shape public opinion overnight. That's why moments involving Kai Cenat, Aiden Ross, Plaquaboy Max, and other creators spread everywhere instantly. Fans were analyzing their reactions almost as much as the songs themselves. If a streamer looked confused, Twitter exploded. If someone replayed a bar excitedly, TikTok clips went viral immediately. And Drake seemed fully aware of that ecosystem too. That's why fans started noticing how closely tied the Iceman rollout was to internet personalities and live stream culture overall. Because this wasn't just an album release anymore. It felt like a full online event. And despite all the criticism, the numbers were still insane. That's what made the situation even more complicated. People were calling Drake washed publicly, while simultaneously streaming him at ridiculous levels. That contradiction confused everybody. How can an artist supposedly be falling off while still dominating every conversation online? That's why fans started arguing the hate itself was actually helping Drake. Every negative reaction became promotion. Every meme created more attention. Every diss response pushed more people to listen themselves. And Drake knows how to weaponize attention better than almost anyone alive. That's why some fans believe the chaos around Iceman was partially intentional. Not necessarily the backlash itself, but the overwhelming nature of the release. 3 albums, over 40 tracks, multiple disses, endless talking points. It created information overload online. And when people feel overwhelmed by content, They keep returning to it trying to fully process it. That's exactly what happened here. Meanwhile, the criticism itself kept evolving. At first, people mainly attacked the album's length and bitterness. But later, another criticism started spreading heavily. People began saying Drake sounded lonely. That observation hit differently, because underneath all the aggression, confidence, and bars, Iceman often sounded emotionally isolated, like Drake no longer trusted anybody around him fully. And once fans noticed that emotional tone, the album started feeling darker, especially when people replayed the bars aimed at LeBron James, DJ Khaled, and J. Cole. Because those weren't random enemies. Those were people Drake once seemed genuinely close to publicly. That's why listeners started describing the album less like rap beef music and more like a paranoia album. An album about watching relationships collapse after public humiliation. And honestly, that interpretation made a lot of sense. Because after the Kendrick battle, Drake's image changed permanently online. Before 2024, Drake usually felt untouchable culturally. Even when people joked about him, the jokes never truly damaged his dominance. But Kendrick changed something psychologically. For the first time, large sections of the internet genuinely enjoyed seeing Drake vulnerable. That shift matters, and Iceman feels deeply aware of it. That's why the album constantly references betrayal, fake support, switch sides, and industry politics. It sounds like Drake no longer views the rap industry as trustworthy at all. And the more people analyze that emotional layer, the more interesting the album became. Even critics who disliked parts of it admitted Drake sounded more emotionally exposed than usual. That vulnerability made the project strangely compelling. Because listeners weren't just hearing a superstar bragging anymore. They were hearing somebody trying to regain control of their reputation in real time. And according to reactions online, that desperation either made the album stronger or made it uncomfortable, depending on who you ask. Meanwhile, another conversation exploded online too. The possibility that Drake's legal tensions with Universal Music Group were influencing everything. Fans started connecting dots everywhere. The giant release volume, the contract theories, the industry shots, the references to systems and labels. Some listeners became convinced Iceman wasn't only about rap beef. They believed Drake was quietly preparing for a much bigger war behind the scenes. A war involving contracts, ownership, loyalty, and control over his career itself. That theory made the album feel even more dramatic online. Because now people weren't only debating music quality anymore. They were debating whether Drake was strategically trying to escape industry control while simultaneously rebuilding his public image after Kendrick damaged it. That's huge. And suddenly even critics who hated the album admitted something important. Nobody else in hip-hop could create this level of conversation right now. That alone proved Drake still had massive power culturally. Which brings us to the biggest question fans started asking by the end of What If Iceman was never supposed to sound comfortable? What if Drake intentionally made an album that feels angry, messy, paranoid, emotional, bloated, aggressive, and exhausting? Because that's exactly what his life and career feel like right now after surviving the biggest public takedown attempt of his entire career. One thing has become painfully obvious about Drake and Iceman. This album is no longer just music. It's a public war over legacy. And honestly, that's why the reactions became so emotional online. Because whether people love Drake or hate him, everybody understands the same thing. We are watching one of the biggest artists in hip-hop history fight to protect his position in real time. That's what makes this whole situation feel bigger than a normal album release. The internet isn't just judging songs anymore. It's judging whether Drake still deserves his throne after the Kendrick-Lamar battle changed public perception forever. That's the real tension behind Iceman. And Drake seems fully aware of it throughout the entire project. That's why the album sounds so aggressive emotionally. Not because Drake is simply dissing people, but because he sounds like somebody trying to remind the world who he is before the culture moves on without him. That pressure changes everything. Especially for an artist who spent over a decade dominating music at the highest level. Because for years, Drake controlled the conversation almost effortlessly. Every album became an event. Every feature became a hit. Every meme still helped him somehow. But after Kendrick, the aura changed, and Iceman feels like Drake realizing that in real time. That's why the project constantly swings between confidence and frustration. 1 second Drake sounds untouchable. The next second he sounds betrayed. Then angry. Then paranoid. Then cold again. That emotional instability is exactly why the internet became obsessed with the album. Because people weren't only hearing bars. They were hearing a superstar under pressure. And once audiences sense pressure, they become fascinated. That's why every reaction clip exploded online. Fans weren't just analyzing the music anymore. They were analyzing Drake himself psychologically. People started asking, does Drake still trust the industry? Does he secretly regret how the Kendrick battle unfolded? Is he genuinely hurt by celebrities switching sides? Or is this entire thing another calculated Drake strategy? Those questions kept the album alive online nonstop. Meanwhile, the silence from certain people became just as loud as the responses. Kendrick Lamar stayed mostly quiet. The Weeknd stayed quiet. A$AP Rocky stayed quiet publicly too. And honestly, that silence made Drake's disses feel even heavier. Because instead of creating another explosive rap war immediately, Iceman often felt like Drake yelling into a room where certain people had already emotionally moved on. That's a dark feeling, especially for somebody used to controlling every conversation. And fans online noticed that emotional imbalance instantly. That's why people kept debating whether Iceman sounded powerful or lonely. Because both interpretations make sense. On one hand, Drake is still pulling insane streaming numbers, still dominating headlines, still controlling internet conversations, still making everybody react. That's power. But on the other hand, the album also sounds like somebody deeply aware that public opinion shifted against him after 2024. That awareness sits over the entire project like a shadow. And honestly, that's what makes Iceman strangely compelling even for people who dislike parts of it. It doesn't sound comfortable. It sounds like survival. That's why fans started comparing this era of Drake to wounded heavyweight champions in sports. Still dangerous, still skilled, still capable of winning, but no longer untouchable. And once an artist loses the untouchable feeling publicly, every future release becomes psychologically different. Now audiences don't just consume the music. They search for weakness inside it. That's exactly what happened with Iceman. Every lyric got overanalyzed. Every diss got debated. Every reaction clip became evidence for one side or the other. The internet basically turned the album into a giant public trial about Drake's career status. And the craziest part, the chaos itself may actually help him long-term. Because regardless of criticism, Iceman completely dominated attention. Nobody ignored it. That matters. In modern music culture, attention is power. And Drake still controls attention better than almost anyone alive. Even the hate fuels him. That's why his quiet Instagram response hit so differently. While everybody screamed online, Drake simply posted old "take care" criticism and disappeared again. No emotional breakdown. No desperate explanation. Just a reminder that people doubted him before. That response felt cold. Calculated. Almost like Drake was telling the world, "You've buried me too early before." And honestly, that's what makes this entire story so fascinating. Because nobody truly knows whether Iceman is the beginning of Drake's decline, or the beginning of another comeback narrative that eventually makes everybody criticizing him right now look ridiculous later. Only time can answer that. But one thing is undeniable. After all the backlash, disses, reactions, criticism, trolling, and non-stop debates, Drake still managed to do the one thing almost nobody else in hip-hop can do anymore. Make the entire culture stop and talk about him for days straight. So after all the backlash, the reactions, the streamer clips, the rapper responses, and the non-stop debate surrounding Drake and Iceman, one huge question still remains. Is this really the beginning of Drake's downfall? Or are people once again underestimating him way too early? Because whether you love the album or hate it, one thing is undeniable. Drake still knows how to control the entire conversation in hip-hop better than almost anybody alive. And honestly, that might be the scariest part for his critics right now. Now I want to hear your opinion. Did Iceman actually live up to the hype? Was Drake right to diss everybody who switched sides during the Kendrick situation? Or does the album sound like somebody struggling to move on from the biggest loss of his career? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me which diss shocked you the most. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn notifications on, because this Drake situation keeps getting crazier every single day. And trust me, the industry reaction is far from over.